Hello and welcome to this course on rapid requirements gathering for BI and analytics. My name is Nicholas Kelly and I will be teaching you the practical steps to gather requirements within the enterprise. You'll also be learning the various skills that you need to develop in order to take your analytics career to the next level. Because I'm going to be giving you a lot of information, I suggest you have a pen and paper at hand with some sticky notes for the practical portion of the course. We'll be moving at a fast pace and there's loads of material to cover, including, but not limited to, why do dashboards and reports fail to be adopted, what it takes to be successful in BI and analytics, understanding the so what, the levers of adoption, how to connect business goals to actions via visuals, and finally, making your first steps in driving adoption right now. So by the end of the course, you're going to know how to leverage and apply the most impactful technique I know, how to drive value in enterprise reports and dashboards. Now the thing is, it's a very simple concept, so simple that it can actually seem trivial. However, I promise you that if you apply what you learn in this course, you're going to increase adoption and engagement in your reports and your own dashboards. So I implore you, finish this short course and experience what it can do for you in your career, just like Jesse Foley here, a BI analyst who found it ridiculously effective. Together we can start to reduce the number of low impact, low adoption dashboards and reports that no one really cares about. Now, to reward you for your attention, I will be giving you a gift at the end. It's a gift you'll be able to start using right away, but please, you do need to stick around to the end to get the whole experience. Before we get started, allow me to tell you a little bit about myself and how I came to be here talking to you. You might be surprised to learn that I wasn't always working in analytics. Cast your mind back to 2012 when the world was supposed to have ended and I was working in Singapore as a director of UI and UX for a software company that was located on the penthouse suite of this building. Now, as fortune would have it, I was approached by the global leader in analytics consulting, Deloitte Analytics, to come and lead their data visualization practice over in this building. There was one small problem though. I knew precious little about analytics or data science. Sure, my degree in computer science helped and the expertise in designing and developing user interfaces mapped over quite well, but it was an intimidating prospect, I must say. I was just some guy who grew up in a field in Ireland. How on earth was I going to succeed amid some of the sharpest minds in analytics? Well, long story short, it was an absolute wild ride and I was fortunate to work with senior executives of global multinationals and I even got to work in designing dashboards for Formula One teams. The experience had me travel all over the world and some patterns started to emerge regardless of the location of the client. There was a distinct inability to create dashboards and reports that people loved. Indeed, I was seeing mountains and mountains of rotting, decaying, fetid dashboards and reports that ate up resources and provided little value. Actually, the rule and not the exception was that the standard report was ROI negative. Now, sure, there were all the data and technology issues one would expect, but as far as I could tell, the root problem was an inability to adequately engage the business and understand what they really needed while connecting that need to a set of actions that would drive the requisite change for the business. Now, the glue for this value chain was the visual interface. In this case, a report or dashboard. User interfaces were, of course, my forte, so I started to apply what I knew about UI and UX, and boom, it worked. It wasn't magic, and it certainly wasn't optimized to analytics yet, but the results were profound. Clients started thinking about outcomes they wanted, what actions were necessary for those outcomes, and working backwards from there, what visuals would they need to see on a dashboard to undertake those actions. They started to realize the promise of data. There was the very real potential of achieving a return on their significant investments in data. It was one of the ways I started to make a name for myself and became a regular on the international speaking circuit. That, and I made a bunch of dashboard design board games, one of which was brought to life on Kickstarter. Now, after years of honing the approach, I'm sharing with you a distilled version of how I do it so you can start applying it right away in your organization and help elevate your own career and save yourself years of frustration. Which brings us on to why are you here? Now, you're obviously here because you want to learn the steps to conduct rapid requirements. But that's the what. We must always start with the why, just like in any analytics endeavor. How can we hope to achieve our goals if we don't know the why? So let's keep this simple. You're either here because you want to make an impact, you love what you do, and you want to help better the world, your environment, maybe your clients, by using data. And that's awesome. A really great thing if you're passionate about it. Another reason might be money. Perhaps you want to be more successful and become wealthier by being more effective with data. We all have to put food on the table, and there's nothing wrong with that. Finally, you might be doing this to accelerate your career. Or maybe your manager wanted you to take the course. Either way, the information in this course will give you a career boost, assuming your career is in data. If it's working in a field, then I have another course for that. But let me tell you, creating high adoption insights is a craft. It takes a lot of effort, but the reward is absolutely worth it. However, if you're just doing it for the money, you might struggle. Some blend of the 2 or 3 is a preference. The more passion you have about the subject, the more you're going to be able to make an impact with it. Now, to be able to do that, we first have to know what it takes to be successful. If you want to elevate your career and take it to the next level, you're really going to have to understand what failure looks like. We often hear the biggest problem is data quality. And while it's a very compelling reason, it's not always the main culprit. The underlying issues that we face with adoption are usually people related. So to understand what is going on, we have to see where the focus is being placed in the enterprise. There is little emphasis on process and people and too much focus on technology and data. We've all been in situations where we hear, if only we could adopt this technology or migrate our data to such and such a platform. Technology is given far too much emphasis. Indeed, with the advent of self-service, technology is being peddled to address people problems. Even the best current technologies cannot get someone to buy into an idea, to shift their thinking, or to influence their behavior when they just don't want to. What is needed in the data world is some more people and change management skills. Of course, that might require years of study, and people have dedicated their lives to developing those expertise. While we're not going to become experts in how to get people on board, we can leverage process to help us make some inroads and emulate what a change expert would do. So to understand this, let's look at a very simple diagram. There you are, and maybe you're part of a BI or analytics team. Maybe you run the team. Maybe it's just you. Whether the team is just you or a group, this team is in the business of creating products. You create products that help people make decisions. Many of these products will have a visual interface, such as a report or a dashboard. Now, you might not think of reports and dashboards as products, but that's what they are ultimately. And I'm telling you this for a reason, because a mindset shift is necessary here in order for you to succeed. So please internalize this. It is simple, but the mindset has a profound effect on how you perceive value creation and how you approach designing an interface. So if we would agree that dashboards and reports are products, then a product must, of course, have a market. Otherwise, it's not a very useful product. For the enterprise, the market is made up of 2 distinct groups at a minimum, stakeholders and users. We're not going to get into the nuances of these 2 groups right now, and there's plenty of nuance there, believe me. For now, they are our market. Now, why on earth would that market buy your product? You don't know it yet, but you're about to become a salesperson. You need to sell your product to your market. You've heard of data storytelling, of course. Well, that is one way to sell the data in the dashboard. But how do we get them in there in the first place? Our product must have value. A product is purchased or adopted if it has value. The more value, the greater the adoption. Therefore, it makes sense that we must ensure that our dashboard has value. To understand how we can create a valuable product, for this specific market, we need an exchange. We need to give them value. We need to give what that value means to them. We have to extract it. We have to understand their goals, the outcomes they want. We need their requirements. Now let's look at these 4 areas, because in order to be successful, they all must work. Sure, you want people to love your work. You want them to trust the data you are giving them and that they get value from it. Of course you want all of that. But you're probably taking this course because it's not happening for you. Perhaps you tried some data viz courses and they were great, but there's some key ingredient missing. Perhaps you tried getting sharp at a specific tool, and while it's a good idea, regardless, the tooling didn't make the impact you had hoped for. I can tell you why that is. Because I've seen all the various combinations. Mostly I've seen the combinations for failure, because I've lived them basically. To break it down a little, it comes down to these 4 areas. If any of them has significant weakness, then adoption will suffer. It doesn't require perfection to be good. That's a good bit of news for you. You don't have to knock everything out of the park. But we're going to start focusing here on the requirements piece. We're going to start getting a little bit good at this requirements portion. Now, of course, if you look at these, you need to be good at all of them. You or your team need to be good at all of them. For example, what if you and your team are great and you make wonderful data products, but you have no idea what your market wants? Then you have a product that has no market demand, therefore low adoption and lots of wasted time and effort. Or how about you have a well-defined market, but you and your team are terrible at conducting interviews and extracting requirements? Then once again, wasted time and effort. So what is it that you really need to see to succeed? Sure, these 4 categories have some use to them, but they are pretty high level. We need them all to work across the board. But to do that, we have to dive in a little bit more detail. So I want to break these down for you even further. To really get to the exact factors that truly unlock high value and high adoption products, and also where the gaps are that you have, let's look at the first piece, the team and the team success variables, which could be you or a group of people. Obviously, it's easier to find these skills spread across a group of folks, but if you're in a fast track for career growth, rounding out your expertise, at least at a surface level, will be greatly to your advantage. So let's pick off a couple of these examples here, like having a consultant mindset. Just because you might be an employee doesn't mean that you can't have the mindset of an external third party. This can be invaluable. A consultant mindset is always being focused on value and how to move the business forward. In your day-to-day, it can be hard to poke your head above the trees and take a wider perspective. Another example would be technical competence, and most people already have this. This box is already ticked for most people. It's usually a given. However, it can be considered the only thing needed to be successful, and that is wildly incorrect. As you're looking here, I'm unfolding some more of these. You're seeing subject matter expertise, facilitation skills, UI design knowledge. You can take your time, pause the video, look at some of these in more detail and see where you are, see where you line up. The 2 areas that I've seen with the biggest impact in this area is UI and UX knowledge and the elements of change management, change awareness. You'd be surprised how little knowledge for these areas is actually needed in order to make transformational impact. So before moving on, please have a look at each item, give yourself a score out of 10, just ballpark it. Pause the video so you can have a little time to contemplate it. You don't need to hit 100. That's not the purpose of this. It's just to see what areas are noticeably weak. Now, moving on to the next section, the dashboard and report success variables. Many of us stumble on making dashboards look attractive, having the appropriate visual layout. More of us still struggle with how to create and set up a narrative structure in a dashboard so it is compelling and drives action. Indeed, it is very rare to come across an individual who is proficient at the dark art of KPI or key performance indicator design. Yet the dashboard needs all of these elements. Now, I know this is a lot to take in. you might be feeling like you have a few gaps here. Again, just take your time, pause the video if you need to, and give yourself a score. However, I've got your back. I'm going to tell you a little fact about Ireland that you can use to elevate yourself above your colleagues. So, while Dublin is technically the true capital of Ireland, Cork is the actual true capital. Cork is generally accepted as the centre of culture and higher learning in the country by people from Cork. Interestingly, there's a very well-known metal band that hails from Cork. This was a pre-apocalypse era in the late 90s. Armed with this immensely valuable information, no doubt you are now on the cusp of enlightenment and about to move out of phase with your current reality. So let us explore a few more requirements, success variables. Now, certainly no business endeavor can succeed without a methodology for assembling and aligning on strategy and goals. But this is one of the most overlooked and skipped steps. It is remarkable to see how many analytics projects have no goals or poorly defined ones with no measurable outcomes. Extracting these goals usually involves some degree of interaction, either through interviews, workshops, in order to craft the personas that are being designed for. Again, please pause here, give yourself a litmus test on where you lie, and take the basic understanding that you have here and give yourself a score. Now, finally, the market aspects present some very foreign concepts for many folks in the BI and analytics space. While all the previous areas feed into adoption, this is the area that really drives visibility and engagement. So be warned here, if the previous areas are poorly executed, this area will exacerbate them and multiply the risk. If done well, however, people will be pumped and excited about your product. I appreciate that these variables may be a little harder to score against, but please pause the video, give yourself a shot. You might need to look up some of these and get a better idea of what they are and what they mean. But we have to power on here. We've got a lot of material to cover. So let's take a look at where you lie across these four areas. Now, you probably have quite a few gaps, and that's totally okay. What I'm showing you here is a distillation of 20 years of my experience of what I have found to be a successful recipe for winning in analytics and BI. Let me be the first to tell you that you do not need to be scoring 10 out of 10 in each of these. But what I am saying is that you need to know enough about each of them. Say about a 5 out of 10 would be great in order to either direct people, assign ownership, or directly do some of the work yourself. Right now, I'm going to get you dangerous on 3 of these. Strategy and goals, building the narrative, and creating the path to action. Of course, there's a lot more to these than what I can show you in this very short time, but I will share what I do in these areas when I am highly constrained on time with a client and have limited engagement from stakeholders and users. So to illustrate this, let us contemplate this burger. Let's say you just ordered it and it's sitting here in front of you. If you like, it can be vegan, paleo, raw food, or an entirely ethereal burger. But let's say I want to change your behavior, or at least influence you to make a more informed action. What would it take? What would you need to see that would provide value in relation to this burger? What if I could see some data about what would happen if you ate it? Would this change your mind? Now, by eating the burger now, you're going to put on this much in weight by next Tuesday. And why next Tuesday? Well, maybe you've got an illegal street fight happening and that's the way in. Of course, not that they're real sticklers for the weight rules, but we've all been there, of course, and we can easily relate. The point is that the date is important to you. Also, you're going to increase your risk of heart attack by 0.3%. That might not be enough for some folks. Certainly it's not enough for you. You need more. You've seen this data before, and you know it's not reliable. It's not even next Tuesday when you have the fight. The date's wrong. So you don't trust this data. Also, you don't care about the heart attack thing because, come on, you're doing street fighting. There's nothing here that will really alter your behavior or compel you to take action. Indeed, your trust for information from this source is now tainted, and it'll be harder to win you over in the future. So, how do I get you on board? How do I make sure value is being provided to you? How do I make you care about this information so that you're going to act on it? To be successful in influencing behavior, there are 4 criteria every dashboard and report must be measured by. We're not going to get into all of them right now, but the linchpin is being persona-based. That is, that we truly understand who this information is for and what motivates them. With this shifted understanding, the information presented would be different. You can see the date for the fight has been updated to the correct date, and the heart attack thing is gone. It's actually been replaced by what you really care about. How does eating the burger impact your odds of winning the street fight? Now look at that. Your odds are dropped by 8%. Maybe this burger isn't such a good idea if you want to come out alive. The action is to not eat the burger. So you can see that the data needs to be personal. And this is a core concept of this course. It is why we focus on persona design. Now imagine I'm overweight, so I'm different to you. My goal is to increase my weight. Then eating this burger may actually be aligned with that goal. Also, I don't do a lot of street fighting, so the chance of winning isn't a thing for me. I don't care about that. Therefore, the information on this dashboard for the very same activity of eating the burger is completely uninteresting to me, while it may be very compelling to you. However, since it doesn't have value to me, I'm not going to engage with it. The more this happens, then the more I'm going to stop trusting the people that present this information to me. That is precisely what this course is going to help you with. How you can make dashboards valuable to the intended users. However, personal, relevant, and timely dashboards are not really enough. They need to drive action, of course. There needs to be a so what. In this very simple example, the action is to eat or not eat the burger. We often don't think in terms of action, but we have to in order to increase adoption. Much more on that later. But for now, always think of the Insight burger when you're creating dashboards. I'll be referring to the burger often, and it's a key reminder of the importance of this example. So let's try and break down what we're trying to do in the enterprise when we're using data. Love to have a data culture proverb just to remind us of what we're doing. Victorious analytics understands value first and then dives into the data, while defeated analytics dives into data first without understanding value. We need to understand value first. So to do that, we need to have a goal. Yet the goal is unrealized, of course. We're driving towards a goal. For the goal to be realized, there is some action or some set of actions that is needed. Of course, there needs to be some way of determining the action that is needed, some means of leveraging data about the business environment. So what do we need? To do that, we need to see something. We need to see some information. We need a visual. Okay, so you're probably seeing where I'm going with this, right? A visual as in something in a report or a dashboard, right? Well, yes, but that's not enough. It's still a little bit abstract and needs to be grounded. That grounding will come in the form of natural language that both technical and non-technical people should be able to interpret. And that's basically a question. So of course the question needs to be granular enough that it leads to action, but not so high level that it's meaningless. Creating these questions is handled in more detail in another course, but for our purposes right now, consider a question like this example. What was our gross revenue so far this year compared to last year? It's a well-defined question. It names a metric, in this case revenue. It is even specific enough to say gross revenue. It also gives a time for when this metric is being sampled as year to date and how it compares to the prior date number. Now, anything I teach in my courses must be practical, with a preference for being low tech. The reason being is that we don't want to alienate anyone, and that's why we use the question approach. I used to love using modern technology when I was running workshops and doing this process in workshops. And here's a picture of me in Singapore with much less gray hair then, pointing at some modern technology. However, I did find that people didn't like using touch interfaces in workshops, at least not everyone. And while it's not as exciting, I did find some simple solutions were the most accessible. So I started to focus on whiteboards and sticky notes. So with that in mind, let me break down the simple application of this approach using sticky notes. Of course, this could be done with real sticky notes ideally, but it does translate reasonably well to remote virtual application. For purposes of illustration, let's work with a HR example, specifically a HR dashboard for the Chief HR Officer on the Death Star. As with any HR dashboard, a primary goal is to reduce attrition. Of course, there will be more than one goal, so bear with me while we work through just one example and appreciate that this approach would scale to however many goals there are. If there are too many goals, however, then they're not really goals anymore, and it's recommended to visit the organizational strategy prior to starting this step. That being said, let's put a goal as reduce attrition by 2% in a year. This goal is both measurable and time-bound, hence a good goal. Again, our dashboard would normally have more than one goal, but let's work through this in a linear fashion. Keep it simple, avoid branching off for now. A typical temptation here is to just create a chart that shows what the current attrition is and call it good. But while useful to know, there's no so what to it. It gives us nothing to get our teeth stuck into. Yet this is exactly where stale and the day-to-day thinking absolutely takes all the life out of insight. Remember the consultant mindset I mentioned earlier? This is where you need to stick your head up and just say, no, we're not doing this mediocre crap again. So with that bit of high drama out of the way, what is a good question for this goal? Thinking it through in order to reduce attrition, it would help to know what is driving the attrition. If we know what's causing it, then perhaps we can take some action to reduce or minimize those factors. So, flipping over to the low-tech, sticky note version of what we're talking about here. Such a question could be, what are the top causes of attrition? Great. So our goal is reduce attrition by 2% in a year. And let's come up with a question to better understand that. What are the top causes of attrition? Do you see how knowing this would help us both take some action and, by taking that action, would move us closer to our goal, right? This is also easily understandable by anyone, from a non-technical executive to a PhD data scientist. We need everyone along for the party, basically. On a side note, talking about data scientists and parties, the party I went to with the lowest ever engagement was an audit analytics event. The attendees were basically comprised of auditors and data scientists, so the term party was probably a profoundly overly aggressive description of what that event was actually like. Anyway, back to our question. On the Death Star, there really are quite a few reasons for attrition, most of them probably involuntary. So to know what the actual reasons are specifically, what visual or visuals is needed in order to answer that question, okay? So this has to be user-led. This should be directly informed by what the user preference is in their own words. Now, I know. The data viz expert in you is saying, shouldn't a best practice chart be used? Well, yes and no, because it depends on what your definition of best practice is. Best practice for data visualization is not necessarily always the same as best practice in user experience. So what does that even mean? Sure, look, let me tell you a story here about that. Okay, so I was designing a dashboard for a C-suite client of a large multinational some years back. And being a little early in my analytics career, I was all pumped up about applying everything I'd learned in data viz best practices. Obviously, pie charts were the spawn of Satan. Even the utterance of them would urge derision from me. I get a thing in my lip. Well, I was informed by the executive assistant for the client that what he really liked was pie charts. And of course, me scoffing from my high throne, I cast aside that preference of the end user, who was obviously clueless about selecting the optimal charts, and made sure there was not a single pie chart in the whole dashboard. I also went the extra step and made sure there wasn't even a single curved visual element in the user interface, just to be extra safe. So the client comes back a little later that week and basically rips me a new one. He proceeds to tell me that he'll never use the dashboard, and adoption for that dashboard was at precisely 0%. Had I listened to the executive assistant and took on board the existing user preference, I probably could have won the adoption prize, and over time, sought to bring the user on a journey through several iterations of the dashboard where we could eventually introduce some data viz best practices. I didn't appreciate that data viz best practices should be a journey in some cases. That's where I learned there was a difference between data visualization best practice and user experience best practice. And now, that's why I create a simple step here in the process that we can get the people on board, right? So we can address that potential issue there. This little activity allows for any existing user preference. So if there is any, we're going to catch it here. Now, in lieu of a clear signal from the user, of course, we can apply data viz standards. But there's more to it than that. It should be about partnership and going on the journey together. There's a reason for all this simplicity and why natural language is being used here. We want engagement. So let's say the user does have some idea of what they want, and they tell us they want a table with each reason being ranked in order of impact. Okay, that's great. We can use that. It can be handy to present some alternative options for them. So, we could basically show them some cards of different chart types. You could kind of flick through them here and give them a sense of that, or you could give them an idea using PowerPoint slides or different visuals, various websites out there that you could help them. Get their feedback. Now, alternatively, you could just go with what they want. There's usually more than one visual that might be needed to answer a question. And when time allows for it, you would also be inserting here a key performance definition activity. But for us right now, we're going to be just quick and dirty about it. Next up is the action, or set of actions that will need to be taken after the user looks at the visual. Now, this is really an integral part of realizing the goal. So remember that burger example we talked about, right? So we were trying to get to an action. We're not allowing for guesswork. We either understand the business well enough to understand what are the drivers of change, or we don't. And this is why we define the actions with the user before any development begins. It's a forcing function to understand the levers of the business on a per goal basis. So in partnership with the user, you talk through the likely actions that would result from looking at the visual. Now, what I love about this is that it's a kind of hybrid self-service. Instead of the user directly working in a BI tool and trying to extract meaning from the data, they're instead partnering with you to determine their needs. So they don't really need to be technically inclined at all here. Sure, like self-service is great for some people, but more people will need to have the more curated approach to getting the insights that they need. And this is what that journey looks like. So yes, it takes more time, than throwing some charts together, but you do want adoption, right? Like, this is what we're going for, and this is what it takes. It's not really that easy, and it's a simple process, but you do have to go through it. So let's say we have our visual in front of us, and we can see the top reasons for attrition. And the top spot maybe is the death by rebel forces. The second spot might be involuntary departure at the hands of Darth Vader. And just talking through these will spark some discussion, of course. And for example, let's say the attrition caused by Darth Vader is unacceptably high. It's 7% of overall attrition. Then we might want to have Darth Vader attend a HR course and see if that could make a dent in our goal. Indeed, number 3 on the list is fear of involuntary attrition at the hands of Darth Vader. So there would be even greater potential upside to having him attend a HR course. Adding that to the sequence looks like this. Now, of course, this is a simple example, but in practical application, there would be many branches and the one-to-many relationships here. But this activity it's really a core element of a wider process to drive successful adoption of dashboards. Indeed, I'm not even to attempt to do a project without doing this activity. I suggest you don't leave home without it, and I'm sharing with you an Excel template I use to track the outputs of this activity on live projects. So be sure to grab the Excel template. You can start using that right away. In summary, by following this approach without knowing it, you have just created a narrative structure for your dashboard. So think about this. You started with a goal, a lofty vision you want the dashboard to be able to manifest through interaction. You figured out what the important questions are you need to be asked and answered by the dashboard. And most importantly, you determined when action is needed. Meaning, we know when users' attention is needed and we need to grab that attention. So what you have here is the basis of value for your market, and it's helped you create the requirements for. So remember, we went through the various stages of you've got your team, you've got a product, and you've got a market you want to sell that product to. To be able to do that, you have to convey value. There has to be an exchange. And for that value, the market needs to give you, or partner with you in giving you those requirements. So I implore you to start using this approach right away. It is so simple, yet of such high impact. Even without all the other steps in the adoption process, this can single-handedly impact adoption. I do hope you enjoyed this session on how to conduct rapid requirements gathering for reports and dashboards. We dipped our toes into 3 of the skills necessary in order to be able to successfully drive adoption of BI and analytics. But those skills are just part of a much wider process. And that process is called the enterprise dashboard process. It's what I use when I'm working with clients every day. It gives you a sense of the context of what we just covered here. So we dived into the actions and workflow portion, but obviously there's a lot more to this. Here is the exact set of steps that I follow to drive adoption with my own clients. Now, with over 20 templates as part of this process and accelerators, it brings you through exactly what you need to do and when you need to do it. Built into the process are all the methods necessary to arm you with the 4 areas that you want to be successful in. Now, I've been teaching the principles of this process for several years, but only really as separate modules. So I wanted to create a single course that would just cover everything. A course that would arm data professionals just like you with all the skills needed to be successful in driving adoption. So I went out and I asked my network, what would they want from such a course? And this is what they came back and they told me. Across the board, people weren't getting the results they want in terms of business outcomes. So they want to focus on business outcomes. Someone commented that the biggest challenge that they have is most courses have very little amount of practical experience, hands-on application. Stakeholder management and how to manage the change a dashboard can introduce. So the impacted dashboard, if it's delivering on the promise of analytics, how do you manage the change within an organization? As well as having a focus on career development. And this was like almost consistently across the board. They wanted a course that would help them be successful in their careers, as well as joining a community of aspiring data professionals who are also taking or have taken the course. And then finally, it needs to be short. I don't have time for a 12-week program, and I am guilty of having some very large and extended length training programs that are obviously super comprehensive, but many people just don't have the time. So I listened, and I'm really excited to announce my new course, the Dashboard Adoption Formula. Now, this is the first time I'm packing the entire process into one course. It has everything that you wanted, and then some. It's a 4-week program that you can take while doing your day job. Indeed, it's designed to be applied directly to your job, with specific activities for each week of the program that you must complete in order to get certified. It was really hard to condense down to 4 weeks. There's just so much content to get across. So to do it, I've only included the exact and specific things you need to succeed. So there's no fluff in there. Now, by taking the course, you're going to be covering the full suite of modules and topics that I cover. From strategy and planning, requirements gathering, framing the problem properly in natural language that basically humans can understand, scoring and prioritization of those questions, and then obviously taking all of those and figuring out what data is available to support them, what maybe data needs work in the future, and how to align with the stakeholders and end users on what the end result is going to look like. Now, of course, this is all highly iterative. Action mapping, which is partly what we did today in this session, but it's going to extend that and go beyond that. As well as some of the real serious important nuggets around UI and UX best practices. And that goes above and beyond data visualization best practices. How do you tell stories, as well as how do you weave charts, key performance indicators, and actions together into a visualization, as well as bringing it all together in wireframing. And the latter portion really focuses on driving the adoption components. Now, of course, we want to talk a little bit about development, but I'm not going to repeat how to build dashboards from a technical perspective. There's great courses on that, and I'm not going to get into that. But I'm going to talk about how do you create the training materials necessary to drive adoption of your end users, as well as managing change and adoption. Now, of course, there's years of methodology behind people who study those things. We're just going to focus on the bits that you need to be successful within your career. Then we're going to touch on the launch and iteration planning, as well as how do you run all of this in a workshop. I'm going to give you a super light version of that. So there's obviously a lot of material in here. I've traveled the world teaching this content, and here's what a small sample of people have to say once they've experienced it. You can see it goes beyond just data visualization and storytelling, which I still cover extensively in the course, of course. But it's more than that because it's not enough if you want to succeed. Like Jesse, who found it ridiculously effective, or like Bora and his team, who found it facilitated a cultural shift in how data was used and adopted within his team and organization. As well as Kelly was able to directly apply it to her work right away. So you can find lots more testimonials on our website if you want to dig into that and explore it a little bit more. I'm so passionate that others experience these transformations that I even wrote a book about it, as well as developing a series of award-winning board games that make it easier for professionals to collaborate in defining and designing their dashboards. So that includes the dashboard wireframe kit, as well as the dashboard requirements kit. Both of these, which are innovative ways to bring people together and start coming up with true business transformation and business value. But enough about all of that. I did promise you a gift if you stayed until the end, and here it comes. It's a really insane bundle for my new course, and all the different modules are included in there that we've just discussed. So if you were to come to a conference to see me cover even just a portion of the topics that I've mentioned, you'd spend over $2,000. However, I'm making this new course available for $1,499. Now that's for a distillation of what I've learned over the past 20 years in BI and analytics, change management, as well as what I know from user interface design and user experience. And I can really help you avoid all the mistakes I've made and what I've discovered that actually works in the real world. Not just the theoretical approach, but what are we dealing with in reality? But you know what? To make you even more successful, I'm throwing in my Executive Primer course. This is what you would share with your colleagues in the business to let them know what to expect from you when you start applying what you've learned from the Dashboard Adoption Formula course. It makes it way easier to get them on board, especially if you struggle with getting the value proposition across to people. So it's a video you can quickly share with them, very brief, all the key nuggets in there so they understand the approach and the philosophy. It's an effort to extend data literacy to your stakeholders and peers that you're working with. But you know what? I'm still not done here. Career development has become especially important for data professionals. So I'm going to include my Career Accelerator course to put your career on the fast track. There's tips in there about how to work with business stakeholders, how to show up differently, and how to be laser focused on value. Together, these courses are valued at $299. Now, that's already a pretty good deal, but I'm still not done. If you sign up within the next 7 days, I'm gifting you a dashboard wireframe kit. The award-winning and innovative kit that started life being 100% funded on Kickstarter. You'll even get the PowerPoint version of it for free. Together, that's $199 in value. An actual physical kit will be shipped to your door at no additional charge. So in total, when we bring these all together, it comes to $1,997, which is already a great deal. It's going to save you all the time and then the value that you can deliver on. But if you buy within the next 7 days, I'm going to give this to you for $995. That's over 50% off. And I promise you right now, I will never be offering a deal this good again. That's 3 courses and a physical kit with over 20 templates included that you can directly use and make your career, make you massively successful. So you have to do this within the next 7 days. Now you might be wondering, why am I doing this? Why is this a deal available and why is it available now? Well, I have several reasons. Firstly, I'm celebrating this new course. It's a milestone in my career in distilling the key knowledge that I've acquired over the years. I'm excited because this course helps me make a great impact in your careers. So that's something that I can share with you and save you time and frustration. And let me tell you, I wish I had access to this information back in the early days of my analytics journey. It would have saved me years, and I want to share my experiences with anyone that I can. And one way to do that is by building up a community around all of this and around the course, and to get people involved and interacting and engaging. So I want to quickly build this community, and part of doing that is I'm offering a discount in order to bring people together so we can share and help each other on real world problems and projects. And I'm within that community. I'll be engaging and having been available for discussions and back and forth within there. So I do hope you join me. So you might be wondering how you get the deal. So how do you get this? If you watch the video all the way through without skipping, you're going to see a coupon code, and a link to redeem the coupon code will appear below this video. This is the code you will use to buy the bundle. Just copy your unique coupon code and then click the button Get Your Offer. As a backup, an email will be sent to you with the details to avail of this offer, so you can still access it within the limited 7-day period that this offer lasts. If you're watching on YouTube, just use the link below to get the offer, and just click that and it'll go to a website, and you drop your email in and follow the steps that are there. Remember now, this is a limited window. It'll work for just you, or if you have a team you want to enroll, it'll still work for a group of people. I'd really love to see you take this offer and see you succeed and hear from you and hear how it goes. As we part ways at the end of this free training, I'd like to share a data culture proverb with you. All insight is based on understanding your users. So I really hope to see you on that course. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much for taking the time. I look forward to seeing you again.